protect their power, to preserve it, to change the constitution so they can remain in power beyond what the constitution initially had said.
Which you were talking about in the last segment.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And if you look at many African countries, even when they have elections, there are very few countries in Africa that have genuinely free elections. And those that have genuinely free elections, they are deeply contested, very much like in Haiti.
Dr. Fatton, in addition to your extensive scholarship on Haiti, your homeland, you're also a scholar of Africa. And I know what I'm about to ask is probably not wise to ask this question. It's always difficult to compare countries, so many different historical backgrounds and scenarios. But I wonder if you've discovered any parallel trends in development of democracy and stable society between Haiti and any African countries.
Yeah, there are lots of parallels. They are not the same, obviously. But the phenomenon of what I call predatory democracy is something that you can find in Africa. In other words, you have elections, but the elections tend to be fraudulent. The people who are elected seek to protect their power, to preserve it, to change the constitution so they can remain in power beyond what the constitution initially had said.
Which you were talking about in the last segment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And if you look at many African countries, even when they have elections, there are very few countries in Africa that have genuinely free elections. And those that have genuinely free elections, they are deeply contested, very much like in Haiti. I mean, if you look at recent elections in Senegal, in Kenya, the victors claim victory, but the losers claim that they were stolen, whether that's true or not. But, and you have problems, you have protests, and eventually there is some sort of an agreement between the contending groups, but that's very real in sub-Saharan Africa. The other thing that is very real is continuous attempts to change the constitution so that you can prolong your term almost eternally. In other words, if you have 2 terms while you are in power, you say, okay, I'm such a good leader that I'm going to change the constitution so I have a 3rd term.
I'm going to give my life service to the country.
Exactly. And you've had many coups. I mean, very recently, you have had coups in Mali. You have had a recent coup in Niger. You had the coup in Burkina Faso. If you look at Uganda, Museveni is trying to prolong his term indefinitely, and even his son seems to be the one who's going to be the next in line. Gabon is the same. So you name it, you have that kind of thing. The difference, I think, is that in those countries, you also have ethnic conflicts that we don't really have in Haiti, which exacerbate the problems to some extent. So in Haiti, you have just a limited amount of conflict between, as I've said, the light skin, but this is not as intense as the ethnic conflicts that you have had in many sub-Saharan African countries. So that's, to some extent, a difference. The other difference is that, for good or ill, we are very close to the United States, which means that we are in that sphere of influence. So whether Haitians
by we, you mean Haiti?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that generates different kinds of entanglements. Although in West Africa, in French West Africa in particular, the French were very significant in
yeah.
But that is dissipating.
If I may add, another difference that I observed as I was preparing for this conversation with you is that Haiti hasn't been an outright colony of any nation. I use that word colony in the formal sense since, you and I discussed this 2 years ago, since 1804. Am I correct? Versus, many of these African countries in the sub-Saharan area, in the Sahel region or whatever, were colonies up to 1950s, 1960s.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is this difference in history a positive impact on Haiti, or does it change any of our conversation here?
I think Haitians are extremely proud of the fact that they've been independent since 1804.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Haiti has been totally dependent on the external world, whether we like it or not. But we haven't been really a colony in that sense. But if you look at certain events in the history of the country, for instance, the so-called indemnity that the Haitian government consented to pay to the French, so that the French government in 1825 would recognize Haiti, is an indication that we were independent, but we were besieged by the international community.
Yeah.
I mean, the very fact that Haiti was the first Black independent country in a system that was a white supremacy system at the time meant that Haiti from the very beginning was a pariah nation. So
it threatened all the white empires.
Yes, exactly. So that is kind of a different mentality. But then we were occupied by the United States, and we were financially totally dependent on the external institutions and powerful countries.
I see.
So there is in the mind of Haitians that we are independent, we are free, we are the first. But on the other hand, there's a reality that is very constraining.
I see. Given all this history, recent, past, and distant past, going back to 1804, at this point, do you consider Haiti a failed state?
Failed state is a loaded term for me.
Yeah, I don't even, could you define that for us, please?
When you read the literature, it's essentially the result of internal phenomena, the culture, the economy, etc., etc. And there is that. I mean, Haitians are quite a factor in the fact that they failed. But on the other hand, I think there is the external arena, which has exacerbated the conditions in Haiti. And what I mean by that, and that clearly not everyone would agree with that, but the neoliberal model that has been imposed on Haiti since the late 1970s, I think, has been an utter failure. It has led to the really evisceration of the state.
And that has been introduced and imposed by foreigners.
I would argue not exclusively, because the Haitians were the other part of the equation, as it were.
I see.
But when you decide that you should open your economy completely in a poor country like Haiti for agricultural goods, for any kind of goods, that means that your local productive capacity is going to be destroyed. And you have very clear examples of that. I mean, the most celebrated one, or the most infamous one, is the one about rice. Haiti was self-sufficient in terms of rice production up till really the late 1980s. And then the IMF, USAID decided that the best thing to do was to open up the economy completely to almost abolish entirely any type of tariffs on rice importation. And what happened is that rice production in Haiti collapsed.
Because you bring cheaper rice from abroad.
Yes, exactly. And the thing which is also paradoxical is that the cheaper rice came initially from Arkansas. And the policies, and you know who was behind that?
Who?
Bill Clinton.
And
actually,
so this is a double whammy, one with Bill Clinton, later with Hillary Clinton.
And he apologized very publicly about this fact that he destroyed the rice system in Haiti.
He did?
He did, in front of the Senate. He said so. But nothing has been done about it.
Oh, boy.
So and the argument was that you're going to get, obviously, cheaper rice, which is true. But once you get the cheaper rice, what happens is that your local agricultural sector is destroyed. And then
happens all the time,
people who import the rice can increase the price. And, it's been almost now, 40 years And what happened is that the taste has changed too. So people like the rice coming from the United States or from Vietnam. And both countries subsidize their rice production. In Haiti, we are not supposed to subsidize anything.
Oh, my goodness. And here are the big, powerful nations of the world, such as us and China and many others who have tariffs and they subsidize.
Absolutely. This is
Haiti
the irony of it
adhering.
all. Yeah.
So,
and the other thing too is, and it's something that one can understand, but on the other hand, it's extremely problematic, is the growth of the NGO sector. And that is a real foreign phenomenon. In other words, the IMF, the World Bank, USAID, the French, the Canadians have said, the Haitian state is so corrupt that we are not going to give money to the Haitian state, we are going to give it to NGOs. So you have a proliferation of NGOs in Haiti. And that means that the state has been completely retrenched. And this is why you have no functioning state to a large degree. And you don't really have a less corrupt society, because what happens is that all of the bureaucrats who are in the state, they lose their job. What do?
They work for the NGOs.
They work for the
NGOs. Oh boy. So to go back to my answer that whether or not Haiti is a failed state, and you can ask that question about many other countries. One of the distinctions that you're drawing, if I get this correctly, is that it may not be a failed state per that definition because there's so much external pressure and impact. Goes back to our earlier conversation about intervention, interference, and invasion, right?
Yeah,
that's an interesting distinction. Yeah,
I mean, internal and external factors have really fused to create that situation. And the general assumption about failed states is that it is to a large degree a purely internal phenomenon. Now, as I've said, Haitians are quite responsible for their own problems too.
But there's a lot of external pressure on Haiti.
There's a lot of external intervention that has exacerbated the conditions. And many of the leaders who became leaders of Haiti were to a large degree tied to foreign powers.
Interesting.
They were not necessarily the choice of the Haitians.
If you wanted our audience to remember just one point about Haiti after everything we've talked about, what would it be? Just one point.
It's difficult to say because, bottom line is that I'm Haitian and I've portrayed a picture that is a picture of catastrophe, which is partly true. But on the other hand, what is also amazing is that in that catastrophe, people continue to manage to survive. Now, this is not something
that is amazing.
It's amazing, but it's not necessarily something that one should celebrate, because instead of doing that, we should come together and try to have a better solution.
Yeah.
This is my ultimate hope, that the crisis is so acute now that people will be compelled to have an agreement. But I've been saying that since the earthquake, because I thought the earthquake was such a calamity and not of our own making, as it were, although the disaster...
That would bring everyone together.
Yeah. And there was a moment where I said, this is it, because that's the only way to escape to that catastrophe.
It's nobody's fault, and everyone could coalesce over...
And we almost did it, but unfortunately, Préval's term was over, and as I've said, he was so disturbed by the earthquake that he didn't manage to have that moment which would have sealed him as one of the great leaders of Haiti. And then we had elections that were quite bad, and the election should never have taken place in the conditions in the aftermath of the earthquake, because there was no logistical capacity to have good elections. And this is one of the problems too. And this is something that I would like to emphasize. The idea that you should have elections immediately in the country, even if there is a modicum of order, I think would be a disastrous decision. I think it needs to be a transition. We need to have a good electoral
establishment, foundation.
Yeah, we need the logistical support to have those elections. We need an electoral council. I mean, the electoral council was supposed to have been a permanent electoral council since 1987. We have never had a permanent electoral council. Every election has brought a new council, which is a source of infighting between the different political groups. And the electoral councils have clearly moved elections in one direction without having good elections.
Yeah, they've had their own biases.
So if we have to have elections, it better be good and legitimate. And at the moment, we can't have that. We don't even know what's the total population in Haiti.
Yeah, because as you explained, the mechanical act of going through an election in and of itself doesn't mean that this is a democratic nation.
Yeah.
Got it. Dr. Fatton, thank you so much for educating me and our listeners. And to our listeners, if you know of any history that could provide more perspective from the past on this subject, please share it with us and tell us what's your perspective. Thank you so much, Dr. Fatton.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. It's always an interesting conversation.
For sure.